Hi, good morning to everybody. Hopefully, everybody's doing great and are ready for this new adventure. So, as everybody should have, you posted your questions from yesterday evening. There were 11 questions. I just make sure for a moment that we're all on board and double check audio and everything so you could hear me clearly because the video is designed so you do not lose any type of understanding of the content being presented. Before I go into details on the questions, because I'll review 1 through 11, and I ask you to go through them and truthfully go through them, add the details necessary for a clear understanding of each and every one of them, and do ask questions if you need some assistance. What I like everybody to be aware of first and foremost is what you should have uh, between now and instead of by the end of today, I'll even extend it to the end of Sunday evening to go ahead and correct these 11 questions. I'd like you to post an image or a series of images that show that you have done this, have the number wrong on the top, have the corrections there. This is deep for your understanding of the material. I also will have a second post if you take a look here. So there's one for a picture of your corrections. There's a second for taking a deep look inside of Jefferson's first inaugural address. So what I like to do for a moment, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit, and I will share the screen so you can see a little bit here. So what I like to do is go ahead and show you the document here. So the document that you have, okay, and sorry for a bunch of pages, but everybody should have this document. It's available digital. Do you need to print it? No. You can if it's helpful. I like you to go through it. If you take a look, the document is not incredibly long. It is Jefferson's first inauguration. There are 13 questions. I'd like each question answered in at least a full detailed sentence. Please do not leave any blanks. The next few days will be very difficult for me if we start to leave blanks and I have to give partial credit and all of that. So I'd like to just give everybody full credit. If you plan to do it on the worksheet, you'd have to print it. I really would rather you go ahead and do this in your notebook, single full sentence each, handwritten so I can read it. Please make it clear so I can read it. If that's going to be difficult, how about you just type the 12 and post that document, attach the document. That would be great. I will go ahead and review this with you next week, so don't worry about that. So in addition to correcting the questions that are coming up, please go ahead and take a look at that inauguration, a very critical moment in history, especially for this new administration. Let me just pull this up here. You don't need to go ahead and jot anything down per these notes here, but I do want to go through several of the questions, and I will be flipping back and forth to several of my notes and the textbook and workbook. So please go ahead to number one. Number one says summarize Jefferson's economic policy. So on your question number one, first of all, it's extremely, extremely important to know Jefferson's stance. Uh, the way he comes into the office pretty quickly, right? He's going to want to lessen the government power. So he wants to lessen the power of the government first and foremost by reducing the federal budget. The federal budget would be the budget for the nation. These budgets would allow to keep the federal debt low. We know the consequences that came with the revolution. We know the debt that the nation was in at the time. He's aware of situations the nation has been in that involve a lot of debt. So his goal, right? His goal is to cut the budget to keep the federal debt low. He can't do it himself. Okay, he can't do it himself. So he calls on the Secretary of the Treasury to help him with this goal. With the goal, it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task. The individual specifically is Albert Galatian. Albert Galatian is essential in assisting Jefferson achieve this. The textbook refers to him as a financial wizard because he reduced government spending through very, very careful management. At the same time, Jefferson believed in the economic idea that was known as laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is essential for you to take a moment and jot down, so please do so. It's the French term of let do, meaning letting the people do as they please. What does that mean? It's a great promotion on free competition. The textbook does go into details on where Jefferson pursues the free enterprise economic policies suggested by Adam Smith's 1776 book, The Wealth of Nations. If you need any further assistance, take a look at 257 in the textbook. Number 2, what might have been considered surprising about John Marshall's action in establishing judicial review? I'm just going to pull this slide here. You don't necessarily need to write it down. I do really need each and every one of you to make sure you jot it down. Marbury v. Madison. The first time the court declared a law unconstitutional. It's there in bold. Put it with this question, please. Judicial review, okay? If you take a look at one of the bullets right around here, okay, towards the end, second from last, through the decision limited the power of Supreme Court in this case. It established the power of judicial review. So, basically, this is a critical moment, a surprising moment in history, because John Marshall, you do need to be aware, right, the head Supreme Court justice as Supreme Court Chief Justice, so to say, is going to play a critical role here. Now, midnight judges. Adams is going to appoint these midnight judges. And basically, specifically, we're looking at William Marbury. William Marbury is that midnight judge. And they accuse the Federalists of using unfair tactics to keep control of the court. Well, what happens in this ruling? The Supreme Court ruled against Marbury. Chief Justice Marshall wrote the decision stating that the Judiciary Act was unconstitutional. What's surprising here is the Supreme Court is taking that stance of saying, well, wait a minute, what has been just done is unconstitutional. Pretty critical moment in history, and very, very surprising to many, to say the least. Why do you think President Jefferson, who believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, decided that the president had the power to buy land when that was not mentioned in the Constitution? Okay, this is question number 3. So, well, first of all, you're going to see the nation really expand in size during this time. Really incredible how it will grow. Let me just pull that slide here so you can see. Okay, here's a great map so you can see a little bit of the Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson decided that he did have the authority to buy Louisiana. How does he defend that? He's saying that the Constitution allowed the president to make treaties, and buying the Louisiana Territory was a part of a treaty. So he's saying the Constitution says the president can make treaties, so buying Louisiana Territory is a part of a treaty. Pretty interesting way there. So make that connection and double check your answer. Number 4, compare how Lewis and Clark's expedition and the Pike expedition were similar and different. So that's number 4. Well, first of all, what I need you to realize, and if anybody's confused, you want to turn to this area roughly in page 264. Lewis and Clark, I hope that many of you are familiar with. These individuals connect very deeply to this time period, to Jefferson. The United States is larger than ever before, and Jefferson wants to explore new territory. So what does he do? He selects his private secretary and former Army captain, Meriwether Lewis. Lewis ends up selecting William Clark, and they lead an expedition. Here are the purposes of the expedition you're going to want to jot down in your answer here. They're going to explore the Mississippi River. They're going to form good relations with natives, okay, with American Indians. And they're going to journal all of this so we can start to explore this many years later, and also to keep everybody informed at the time. What you need to realize here is the other expedition, Pike's expedition. Pike is going to enter Spanish territory. Well, his encounter with the Spanish troops is a little different than Lewis and Clark's sort of peaceful, I would say, in many ways, relationship he had with what they had with the American Indians. But as for Pike, the Spanish troops would arrest him, his men, and take them into present-day Mexico. The Spaniards would take his map, his journals. He was able to hide one map. He was able to have his gun with him. But at the same time, it did expand America's knowledge of the Southwest. So exploring the Mississippi River would tie into Lewis and Clark, and knowledge about the Southwest would tie in to Pike. And just be careful there so you can see how their encounters with those on the territory before are quite different. Number 5, why was the Embargo Act so unpopular? Take a moment in your textbook, turn to 268. The Embargo Act is essential to understand. It hurt Britain, it hurt France, but it hurt the United States the most. Why? Sugar, tea, molasses are cut off during this time. Okay. Sugar, tea, molasses are cut off during this time, and exports end up dropping more than 80 million in 1 year. So cotton, tobacco is piling high in the South. There's an excess amount. And what's the impact? It's going to have a financial impact on the nation. And it's especially going to have a financial impact on New England merchants. But some did resort to smuggling. So you might want to jot that down. Smuggling, illegal tactics used then, used now in many ways. But that does take place then. Number 6, red questions. How would you define Jefferson's idea of government? Well, Jefferson's idea of government, I'm sure you have noticed, he does want the common person to have a say. He's basically known as this individual who wants to speak for the people. You take a look, I pulled up this slide for a reason. He comes dressed to the Capitol as a plain citizen. He wants to connect to the man of the people. And he believes basically that the government should protect the rights of his citizens. The citizens should be protected by the government. And he doesn't believe the federal government should have the active role that they do, but instead reduce it. Again, let's go to the Marbury v. Madison case. Please, for number 7. Why is the Supreme Court case Marbury v. Madison significant? Why is it significant? I'm going to keep saying it, okay? It establishes the power of judicial review. You want to make sure you have what I'm circling right here. It greatly expands the power of the courts to check the actions of the executive and legislative branches. Please make sure you have it. It hadn't been done before. What Adams did there was pretty interesting. And you're going to have William Marbury believe he's going to get this position because Adams appointed him, the president appointed him. But the Supreme Court is going to look into this, and Jefferson, of course, will too. But John Marshall, critical individual during this time. Why was the Port of New Orleans important to many Americans? I know some people have struggled with this question before. Flip to 261 if you were one of those individuals. Basically, he purchases Jefferson, right? He wants to buy New Orleans in order to control a specific port, okay? Why does he want this port? So basically look at 261. What happens here, if you take a look, and you look in 1796, right? 1796. I'm sorry, 1795. President Washington, He wants to find a way to keep the vital port open because Spain controls New Orleans, okay? And it sometimes threatens to close its ports. Washington goes back to Washington. He wants to keep this open. So Spain agreed to let American ships and their goods go down the Mississippi and store them in New Orleans. Okay, so what's the issue then, right? The issue is American ships with their goods traveled there peacefully for a limited time. In 1800, Spain signs a treaty giving Louisiana back to the French. President Jefferson is alarmed. Why? Because he certainly has a reason to worry. Napoleon Bonaparte, whom we should be familiar with, right, from France. He wanted to grow food in Louisiana and ship it to the French islands in the West Indies. That's his goal. And the U.S. here also would need this port. What's happening here is when Spain goes ahead and signs a treaty giving Louisiana back to the French, the U.S. have an obstacle in the way. So it's impacting trade. It's a tremendous impact on trade. Make sure you have that very clear. Almost done here. We continue. Why did President Jefferson want Lewis and Clark to treat Native Americans fairly on their journey? He wanted them to be treated fairly. You might say, wow, that's incredible because we haven't heard a lot of this before. He wants them treated fairly because Jefferson knows, that they know the land better than anybody else. The Native Americans were there before. They know the land. They know the value of the land. And they know how it can be used as a great resource. So what he wanted Lewis and Clark to do is not just decimate all of them, but instead go ahead and use them as a resource to help the nation expand, but expand successfully. Pretty interesting. Why were Britain and France seizing American ships? So if anybody's confused, 268. Why were they seizing American ships? So basically, what needs to happen here is Britain and France went to war in 1803. You might say, Mr. Ray, they did it already. Well, hold on a moment. They're doing it again. And Americans would profit from the conflict. But at first, British and French ships continue to fight. They're fighting. They're not going to be involved in trade here. So why would they seize American ships? Basically, British would, they would stop American vessels, and they would seize any British sailors who served on the American ships. That's what you want to make sure you have down. British seized any British soldiers who served on American ships. And many American-born soldiers were also involved there as well, in the sense that they kind of unintentionally were involved. They were impressed and, in that sense, clamoring for war. The last one of the day before we finish up, please make sure you're writing a lot. Why did Americans turn against the Embargo Act? Again, it's essential to know that it hurts New England merchants. It hurts merchants. It's hurting trade. Basically, it's impacting goods. It's impacting goods in this nation. Sugar, tea, and molasses supplies are cut off. People losing money. People are losing supplies. It has a major impact on business, and it has a major impact on the way people live. Those are the questions. Please correct them. Please post your image or images, and please complete the Jefferson inauguration. Have a great day. Stay healthy. Stay safe. Enjoy the weekend. Until next time.